Well, greetings and salutations once again. How about a bonus upload to end this Sunday evening off with? Before we jump into it, a couple links. As you all know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership are in the description below. Merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. Finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go, and yes, they definitely matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into tonight's bonus, shall we? Today's first subscriber, Dogman Encounter. Hello, Jeff. My name is Redacted. I'm 43 years old, and what I'm writing to you about happened 37 years ago. I've struggled with it in a way my entire life. Not in a way of really being traumatized, but just in a way of not being able to believe it was real. I've never forgot about it and never let it go. In fact, it is why I watch 3 different types of YouTube channels, including yours, in effort to learn about these things. If not had been for my experience, I think you were all a bunch of fantasy chasers, but my experience would lead me to believe some of you are onto something. This event happened back in or around 1982, and I was probably 6 years old. I'd say 1982 or 1983. The place was a city named Salina, Kansas. In fact, I can be pretty specific. Our house was on the corner of Revere Drive and South Ohio Street. And our house was the first house on Revere Drive. I believe, even though these days it's a full-blown neighborhood with more that have popped up since. At the time, we were on the eastern or southeastern edge of town. It was a fairly big town of 45,000. At the time, our home was surrounded by open fields, which often had coyotes in them at night. The trees are fairly sparse in central Kansas, and there are really no forests that I remember. A couple of rivers in the area, and Indian Rock, which is a place where there is major battle between Indian tribes, including the Potawatomi and the Kaw, among others. It's just not at all the type of place a dogman should be present. But nevertheless, one night in 1982 or 83, whatever it was, something hit our house very hard and shook the entire house. This happened several times. It scared me and my sister, and my father grabbed his revolver and ran to the front door and opened the door and looked out and said, "What the hell is that? Jesus Christ, what the hell is that?" I, at this point, was crying, asking what it was, and he slammed the door and yelled for us to get into the basement and hide. It hit the house one more time as we went into the basement with my father grabbing his Vietnam-era sniper's rifle and going from window to window looking at this thing. At this point, it quit hitting the house and itself was looking into the windows. He never tried to shoot it, and he said it eventually trotted off into the fields after losing interest. At the time, pressing him what it was, he just said it was a giant dog that was trying to break through the window, and, at the time, he said nothing more. But I was even more scared when I saw him trade out his regular ammo for his silver .38 special rounds for his pistol. The reason why he had silver bullets was because he had let me watch The Howling, which was a werewolf movie. And I had gotten scared at the time. I didn't sleep until he got silver bullets, which were expensive, but him loading them up scared me so bad. I became convinced it was a werewolf, but at all point I didn't want to know. I had watched The Howling a few months previous, and my fear of werewolves was bad, and has been a lifelong fear. My father was in the Vietnam and was a beast. He was certainly a beast at the age of 34 when this happened, and he could bench press 400 pounds or more. No one messed with him, and he would never lose a fight. He never got scared except for that night. At the age of 70, he's still willing to get into a boxing ring. He is a hard man, tough as nails. This year I finally brought the subject back up, asking him what it was out there that night. He said he doesn't know, and it stood about 7.5 feet tall and weighed about 300 to 350 pounds. He said it was on 2 legs when it was looking through the windows, but did go down on all 4s when it trotted off. And it had a weird gait, most similar to a big bear, but really not anything normal. He said he never shot at it because all it would have done was pissed it off. Besides being 7.5 feet tall, he described it as having extremely thick black fur. In fact, he said the fur was so thick he couldn't make out the face, ears, eyes look like. In fact, he couldn't even see its paws/hands as well. He said he saw in the limited light available was this huge size of thick black fur. He doesn't know what it was, doesn't want to know what it was, and doesn't want to think about it. Although I think him grabbing the silver bullets says it all. And we did have the opportunity to see gray wolves when we lived in Maine. They were 150 to 200 pounds, and he says they were pups compared to this monstrous thing all those years back. So that's the story. Other things I can tell you is central Kansas really has no forests that I know of. We don't have bears or wolves or anything like that. We have coyotes and an occasional mountain lion, but nothing like this. On top of that, Kansas is not a hot spot for Dogman. I don't even know where they would hide, but this event happened as sure as I'm breathing, and I've never been able to explain it. I now live in Kentucky, which is a hot spot, but what happened in Salina, Kansas was beyond scary or believable. Thank you for the opportunity to tell my story. This is the first time I've been able to share it. Today's second encounter is a possible Dogman encounter. It was about 15 years ago in northern New Jersey. A friend and I were riding our bikes from his house to mine. It was probably 9:30, 10 o'clock on a summer's night, so it was pitch black when we were coming down the road. He only lived 4 houses away from mine, so it was about 1,500 feet from his house to mine. In front of my house is a swamp as to the legal deed of my parents' home, and across the road on the other side is a swamp as well. We were 200 feet from my driveway right before the swamp begins, and this thing came out of the swamp about 50 to 70 feet in front of us. It was tall, let's say 6 feet at least. Long, lanky legs, long arms, and looked like they could almost touch the ground. I don't know if it had hair or fur, I wasn't close enough to it. And the road was basically pitch black except for the light from the neighboring houses. It walked on its back legs and kind of lumbered out of the swamp, like it kind of used its front legs sometimes to help run. But definitely a rear, 2-legged something anyway. This thing comes out of the swamp and goes into the middle of the street and turns to us and makes this weird, blood-curdling scream, growl, hissing sound. I wish I had a tape because I could not duplicate it. After it makes this noise, it runs across the street into the other swamp. Well, my friends and I almost shit our pants where we stood. U-turned our bikes and hightailed it the hell out of there. We took a few minutes to recoup our thoughts and analyze what the hell just happened. After a few minutes, we agreed that we both saw the same thing but had no idea what had just happened. After regaining our courage, we bolted back down the road to my house. Since that day, I've never seen or heard that thing again. And, for the record, we were both 100% sober, too young to be doing drugs or drink. Today's third encounter is our second subscriber, Dogman Encounter. Hello, Jeffrey. Thank you for replying back to my email. I have an encounter to share with you. I've never told anyone about this encounter because I knew the ridicule I would have suffered because of it. I'm soon to be 55 years old, and, well, I think it's time to share my story, and I feel comfortable with doing so with you and my fellow subscribers on the channel. My encounter took place 30 years ago. I was 24 years old. It took place in Lambertville, New Jersey. That's my mom's hometown. I have a large family on my mom's side, all from that area. I'm from Bucks County, PA, but I spend so much time with my uncles and cousins in Lambertville that I feel like I have two hometowns. I know both areas like the back of my hand. Now, as I said, I was 24 years old, and a very athletic person back then, and I've been hunting and fishing and camping since I was old enough to pee with my father, uncles, and cousins on both sides of my family. So I'm well versed in outdoor survival. I was going through a very hard time at that point of my life. I suffered with some very great personal losses, and I was lost and angry. I got myself in some legal troubles as well, fighting and drinking, that type of stuff. I decided I needed to just get away and go and isolate myself and get in touch with my spiritual side and do some self-evaluation to get my head and life in order. But where? Where could I go and do that? Then I thought of the perfect place outside of Lambertville, New Jersey. A happy place where I spent a lot of time with my cousins, fishing and camping. We called this place the Third Hole. Don't ask me why, I don't know. It's just always been called that. Now, to get to the Third Hole, you had to walk. You couldn't drive, so I parked my car by the old cemetery, and the easiest way to get there is to walk along the tracks, going through the woods and thicket. It's real hard, and it would take you pretty long. I haven't been there for 10 years or so, but I knew my way quite well. You'd have to walk 5 miles down the tracks. It was a beautiful August morning, a little hot, but that didn't bother me. I got my rucksack and supplies, my fishing rods, my .357 and my 12-gauge shotgun, and its case, as well as my cooler with food and soda and water. My tackle gear was in my rucksack as well. I locked my car and started on my trek to the Third Hole. I felt good. I felt at home. I was peaceful. I remember I didn't take a watch with me. When I got to the Third Hole, which is partially under a train trestle, an old one, now it's deep in the woods, but the area was cut down in a circle, about a 200-yard circumference. Long ago, I guess it was for the train line, mainly a freight line. That is the Third Hole. It's just a water hole about 70 feet around, fed by a stream that is stocked with trout, bass, carp, crappie, the usual fish species. But the game fish seem to make their way here and stay in the hole. It's never really been a big fishing area, only a few local knows about it. My family's home, being the nearest house, was about 3 miles away. So when I got there, I immediately noticed it hadn't been used for a long time. It was overgrown with grass and weeds, so I made myself a small camping area. I pitched my tent, made a fire pit, collected rocks, made a circle, then collected firewood for later. That in the evening there was a very large old stump, a couple of them for a matter of fact, next to the camp, which I did use as a table and a stool to sit on. So I built my campfire between them. I finished my camp preparations and set up my rods, and I had my lures and live bait. I used one with live bait and one with lures. Figured I would try to catch my dinner. I set up my rods and took out my Walkman, placed my headphones on my head, cast out my bait line, and then I used my lure rod and got lost in some Led Zeppelin. I was at peace, no anger, no racing thoughts, no distractions. This was going to be a nice weekend alone, or so I thought. Boy, was I wrong. I fished, no worries, caught some small trout, threw them back in, changed my bait line because some small fish had nibbled off it, and kept fishing. I caught 4 nice rainbow trout. That's dinner. I cleaned them, washed them in the stream, laid them on some tin foil on the stump, seasoned them with seasonings I had brought with me. I brought some wild rice with me as well. I got the camping skillet out and the folding pot and use spring water for my rice, which I started to cook first on the fire, since that would take longer than the fish. Kick back and watch the sun start to set. This time I was listening to some Pink Floyd. My rice was done and it was fairly dark, so I got out my Coleman lantern and lit it. The whole campsite lit up and I started cooking my fish over the fire, slowly turning them. Man, did I feel relaxed. Every fiber of my being was just loose, and I felt comfortable in my own skin for the first time in a long time. I was hungry and couldn't wait for some fresh fish and wild rice. My fish was done and I was drooling. It was totally black now, except for my lantern and fire. I took the fish off and placed it on my tin, scooped out some rice on it as well, sprinkled some salt, and grabbed a soda from my cooler. Took my headphones off, and that's when it hit me. An odd feeling. Something just wasn't right with the night. I put my plate down by my feet and listened to the night around me. Boom, that's when it hit me. I had my headphones all day rocking out, and I didn't notice there was no sound. No crickets, no frogs, no coons or possums moving. Nothing from the woods, no bats, not even a damn mosquito was around. Now you have to understand, I'm used to the woods. I don't scare or freak out easy. In fact, never. I'm 6'4", 290 pounds, not an inch of fat on me. Well, at least not back then. My arms were 24.5 inches around and I was benching 400 pounds. I boxed, mixed martial arts, and practiced old school Muay Thai. I was a brick shithouse and cut, and an intimidating figure. And I was a crack shot. I reached over to the stump and pulled my shotgun to me and checked the loads. It was loaded with double-aught buckshot, and I had my .357 on my hip with hollow points. I shouldn't have felt uneasy, but I did. And I didn't know why, at least at that moment I didn't. I picked up my plate and started to slowly eat. After a few minutes, my uneasiness grew. Something told me to slowly turn around. I felt like I was being watched. As I slowly turned my head, I totally lost my mind. Crouching on the stump behind me, just to my left, about 8 feet away, was a frickin' breathing, walking nightmare from the horror movies. It was a frickin' werewolf, but that couldn't be right. It was only a quarter of a moon. I closed my eyes, figuring when I opened them this hallucination would be gone. But I was wrong. When I opened my eyes, he was still there. And yes, I said he because I could see his genitalia. And he was all boy. He was squatting like a man on his horse, and his arms resting on his thighs. And yes, I said arms. This thing had hands, not paws, very long and slender like a raccoon, with an opposable thumb and very long, sharp claws at the end. It had long ears with tufts of fur at the very top. A long snout like a dog's, but wider. And a mouth full of very sharp, shiny teeth. Way too many teeth for its mouth. The eyes were a golden yellow, and they seemed to glow with their own kind of light. And like I said, I am a pretty big guy, and this thing was twice as wide as I am, and then some. Though it's on its haunches, it was over 6 feet tall. This thing's had arms that were twice as big as mine. Its chest and shoulders were huge. Its thighs were humongous. Its stomach was lean and narrow, but ripped beyond belief. It was black as coal, but its muzzle had some gray around it, and there were some streaks of gray in its fur. And its tail was short, hanging over the stump. Taking all of this in only took a few seconds, but it felt like hours. There was no strong, overpowering smells coming from it. It made no sound coming up behind me. Hell, I couldn't even tell you how long it was even there for. I just knew I was dead. I couldn't stand a chance with this thing on a physical level. Those claws could cut me in half in seconds, and I knew it. My only chance was my guns. I slowly eased my hand to my shotgun. When I did, his eyes moved towards my hand, and he ever so slightly moved forward as he was going to spring on me. I slowly moved my hands back, and he relaxed. Now I smelled the odor of shit really strong and realized it was coming from me. I had shit myself out of pure fear. and I swear this thing smiled, and it actually sniffed the air, leaning its head slightly towards me, and its muzzle wrinkled up as to say, "Man, you stink." Then something strange happened. I could see it relax. It just relaxed as I did earlier. Its shoulders loosened up and slumped a little. Its biceps loosened up. Its legs muscles seemed to loosen up as well. My fears seemed to dissipate greatly. It then looked at the fish. I said, "You want 'em? They're yours. Take 'em." He looked at me and cocked his head sideways. I slowly lowered myself off the stump to the ground, lowered my head and eyes from him, and slowly, very slowly, scooted back away from the fire and the stump and from my shotgun. My .357 was on my hip, but I knew if I reached for it, I was good as dead. I kept scooting back. He kept watching me. When I was about 20 feet away or so, he moved. I stopped scooting back and just froze. He hopped off the stump and stood up to his full height. He was at least 9 feet tall. And that was when I noticed that his waist was really narrow, and that his legs were built just like a dog's. He took one step to the fire. That's 8 feet in one step at least. He looked at me, then reached down. His arms fell to his knees, really long from the elbow to his hands, were abnormally long, longer than his upper. He grabbed this fish, looked at me, and just leapt across the stream about 30 to 35 feet or so, and was gone. It was so fast that it took me a while to realize what had just happened, and that it was gone. I just sat there shaking and crying, not ashamed of any of it. That thing was terrifying. It stood on 2 legs like a man. This thing was not made or supposed to exist, but it did, and it's a killing machine. I am a lucky person. I never went back to Third Hole again, nor have I ever camped out again. I still fish during the day with people. I don't go into the woods alone ever, so that's my encounter. Believe me or not, I don't care. I know what happened. I was there, and I wish to all holy hell that I wasn't. I walked out of Third Hole broken, scared, shitty, and all at night, with my guns and my lantern. I don't remember doing it, in fact. I don't even remember driving. I got out of Lambertville, New Jersey, and never went back. My family has to come to me or call me if they want to see me or talk to me. Thank you, Jeffrey, for reading my encounter, even if you don't put it on your channel. At least I know you have read it. Maybe, just maybe, my nightmares of 30 years will finally get better. Now I know it wasn't a werewolf at all, but a dogman. Although that knowledge doesn't make it less terrifying, because I told someone finally. God bless, I hope you're feeling better and that your surgery was a success. Respectfully, redacted. Alright folks, I hope you all enjoyed this bonus upload to end this Sunday off with. Guys, thank you for supporting the channel. Your support is what makes this channel so special, and what continues to make this channel grow and go. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, our family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there, and they are dangerous. If we share just a little bit of information, that same info that we share with each other here on a daily basis, we may save their lives someday. Until next time, God bless you all.